Hello everyone. The first thing we're going to do today is to diagram a sentence, and our sentence is, ouch, that hurts. Now when you diagram this sentence, I want you to skip the word ouch. We will talk about what that is in just a minute. I would like you to just diagram that hurts. So go ahead and pause the video and diagram the sentence, and then we will look at it together. Okay, let's talk about this sentence. First, let's just diagram the that hurts. The first step is to find any prepositional phrases. There are none, so let's draw our baseline and find our predicate, hurts. It's an action verb, and that is our subject, and it is a pronoun. Remember, that can be an adjective, but that's when it's modifying something, like look at that boy. Here it's a pronoun, and it's our subject. Okay, now let's look at the word ouch. This is where we're going to talk about our final part of speech. We've talked so far about nouns, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and I'm missing one of them. Let's see, we've done nouns, pronouns, oh, I didn't say verbs. Verbs, of course. And now we'll talk about our eighth one, which is an interjection. And that word looks like this. Interjection is our eighth part of speech. An interjection is a word that expresses emotion, and an interjection has no grammatical relationship to the rest of the sentence. So it's not modifying anything. It's not serving as one of the main parts of the sentence, like the subject or the predicate or direct object or indirect object, or object of the preposition, or predicate adjective, or a predicate nominative. So it has no grammatical relationship to the rest of the sentence. Often it is followed by an exclamation mark, and I'm going to show you in this textbook that I have some examples of interjections. We have, ouch, that hurts, like the sentence we just did. Goodness, what a haircut. Aha, I know the answer. And sometimes it's set off by a comma. Oh, I wish it were Friday. Or, well, comma, what have you been doing? And here are some commonly used interjections. Aha, hey, hooray, my, oh, oops, ouch, rats. Well, wow, yikes, and yippee. So interjections you will sometimes see in a sentence, and they don't grammatically relate to the rest of the sentence. If you were to diagram that sentence, the interjection just goes on a kind of a floating line up above the sentence. And it's that simple. So that is our eighth part of speech. Also, just so you know, there's something else that you put up on a floating line above the sentence that doesn't grammatically relate to the rest of the sentence. And that I will show you actually right now before we move on to our editing exercise example. And that's something called a noun of direct address. Mom, please bring me my book. Mom, please bring me my book. So that sentence, we have another word that's not really, well, actually, that's not the sentence, sorry, in that sentence, mom would be the subject. That's not the sentence I meant to give you. Let's do this. Mom, would you please bring me my book? And just mom, bring me my book. Mom is the subject. But mom, would you please bring me my book? Skip the word mom for just a minute and diagram, would you please bring me my book? So pause the video and diagram that part of the sentence. Would you please bring me my book? Okay, let's talk about that. There's no prepositional phrase, so I'm going to draw my baseline here, and I've got my predicate. I'm looking for a verb. And you see bring, that's an action verb, but always look and see if there's a helping verb. Remember, the helping verb won't always be right next to the action verb. So we have would is a helping verb. Bring is an action verb. You might not have realized that when you first started diagramming it, but when you got to the end, you probably did when you realized there was no place for would. And then you is our subject. You would bring, right? Please is always an adverb, unless you're using it as an action, like it would please me if you would do this. But please used in this way is always an adverb. And then bring what? Book is a direct object. It's a noun. Whose book? My book. My is an adjective. So let's see if we've got all the parts of the sentence except mom. You, see, would you please bring my book? Oh, we forgot me, and me is an indirect object. Bring a book to or for whom? Me. It's the indirect object, and it is a pronoun. Okay. So there's how we would diagram that part of the sentence. Now, mom. Mom there is something called a noun of direct address. It's not exactly an interjection. It's not expressing emotion like oh or wow or ouch. But it's also not related to the rest of the sentence. If you notice, there's a comma after it too, and we'll talk about that more when we get to more of our comma rules. But for a noun of a direct address, when you're saying something directly to someone, you put a comma after it. Mom, comma, would you please bring me my book? Or dad, comma, look at this. Or Jennifer, please come here. You would put a comma after Jennifer. That's called a noun of direct address. You put a comma after it. But when you diagram, because it doesn't relate to the rest of the sentence grammatically, you just put it on a floating line up above the sentence like that. That M looks very strange. There we go. Okay. So that is how you would diagram the sentence, Mom, would you please bring me my book? Okay, let's go on now to talk about your homework for this week. And your homework for this week was is to complete an editing exercise. Would you please take out the sheet of paper that says you have the editing exercise 1, that's your homework. But take out the sheet of paper that says editing exercise example, please. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to find that editing exercise example. Okay, let's go over this. So you'll start getting quite a bit of these as we learn new usage rules. We're going to put them into practice by editing, which means to correct some writing that you'll be given. So this is a good exercise to do because if you can find mistakes and correct them in exercises like this, then you can find mistakes and correct them in your own writing as well. So let's look at the directions. The following paragraph contains 5 mistakes. Correct each mistake and label with the following numbers. And the numbers are, if it's a sentence fragment, you're going to put a number 1. If it's a comma needed after an introductory dependent clause, you're going to put a number 2. If it's a run-on sentence, you're going to put a number 3. If it's where you need a comma in a compound sentence before a coordinating conjunction, or also a compound complex sentence before a coordinating conjunction that joins 2 independent clauses. Now remember, we don't always put a comma before a coordinating conjunction if it's just joining 2 words, like the boy and the girl walk down the street. There's no comma before that and. That and is not joining 2 independent clauses to join a compound sentence. It's just joining 2 words. You don't need a comma there. But you do when you're joining 2 independent clauses to form a compound sentence or as part of a compound complex sentence. So complete this, please, while I do the same. You can just do it in regular pencil. You don't have to use a red pencil or pen. Just you can just use a regular pencil. Just make sure it's dark enough that you'll be able to see it later what your correction is. Okay, so in fact I would recommend not using a pen because you may need to erase, go back to something. So I would just recommend using a regular pencil that you can erase. All right, so we're looking for these errors: sentence fragment, comma needed after an introductory dependent clause, run-on sentence, or comma needed before a coordinating conjunction. You're going to find the error. When you see an error, you're going to put a number above it and you're going to correct it. So let's look at the first sentence. I love camping. There's nothing wrong with that sentence. It's not a sentence fragment, it's a complete sentence. It's fine, so we'll go on. When the weather is warm, we often go camping. All right, I see an error there. I want you to see if you can find the error in that sentence. There should be a comma somewhere. We need a comma after warm because when the weather is warm is a dependent clause, and we need a comma after an introductory dependent clause. So the when subordinating conjunction should be assigned to you. If you need to, take out that piece of paper and familiarize yourself with those subordinating conjunctions so you'll recognize them when they come up. So when the weather is warm, comma. So we're going to put a number 2 above it because that's our number 2 rule. Comma needed after an introductory dependent clause. All right, so let's go on. When the weather is warm, we often go camping. That looks fine. Because it is fun for the whole family. Because it is fun for the whole family. What? That is a sentence fragment. It's a dependent clause by itself. You can't put a dependent clause by itself because it is fun for the whole family. It has a subject it has a predicate is, but it cannot stand alone because of this because. Now if it just said it is fun for the whole family, it wouldn't be, but it is a sentence fragment. So we're going to put a number 1. Now on the sentence fragments, there are several different ways to correct it. You could just mark out that because, or you could attach the clause if it makes sense to attach it to the next sentence. You could do that. So you could mark out the because. If you do, you'll want to put a little thing that tells you to capitalize. It would look like this. Mark out the because, and then you can put 3 lines under that I. Just means to capitalize it. All right, so, or you could just, if you want, just write in capital I there. It would be the beginning of the sentence. So that's one way to correct it. Also, you might have, and you only have to choose one way, you don't have to do both. Also, you might have put a comma after family because it does make sense with the next part of this. Because it is fun for the whole family, the first thing we do, oh, no, it doesn't. Never mind. You would have to, you could attach it to the part, to the sentence before. When the weather is warm, we often go camping because it is fun for the whole family. In that case, you would have just marked out that capital B and marked out that period to put it with the sentence before. All right, so let's go on. The first thing we do when we arrive is set up our tent. This always takes about an hour. Oh, that's a run-on. I can tell because I paused there, but there's no punctuation there. Now, I paused for a little bit longer than it would indicate for a comma. Remember, you can't put a comma to join 2 independent clauses. That's still a run-on sentence. It's specifically called a comma splice, but you cannot join 2 independent clauses with just a comma. You have to put a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or a semicolon, or you can just put a period and start a new sentence. So let's look at this one. The first thing we do when we arrive is set up our tent. This always takes about an hour. So the first thing I'm going to put is the number. It is a run-on sentence. It's a number 3. I'm going to put it right there. Okay, so the first thing we do when we arrive is set up our tent. This always takes about an hour. I'm just going to put a semicolon there. You might choose to correct it with a comma and an and, or you might choose to put a period and a capital T and start a new sentence. I'm going to put a semicolon. All right, let's go on. If it is time for lunch, we sit down and eat, and then we head to the swimming hole. Okay, if it is time for lunch, comma, we need a comma after an introductory dependent clause. How do I know that this is a dependent clause? Well, look at it. if it is time for lunch. If you're not sure, ask yourself, does it have a subject? It. Yes. Does it have a predicate? Is. Yes. Can it stand alone? No. It has a subordinating conjunction, if. It's a dependent clause. If it is time for lunch. So we need a comma there. So that's a number 2. If it is time for lunch, we sit down and eat, and then we head to the swimming hole. Oh, there's another error. So there's not always just one per sentence. There's another error here. If it is time for lunch, we sit down and eat. That could be a sentence by itself. Then we head to the swimming hole could be a sentence by itself. This is a compound sentence. You need a comma after eat, comma before that and. It goes right after eat there. Remember we talked about in class how it goes right up next to the word that it comes after. It's not eat, space, comma, space, and. It's eat, comma, space, and. So this is actually, look at this sentence. If it is time for lunch, we sit down and eat, and then we head to the swimming hole. See if you can figure out what type of sentence this is. I just want you to think about that for a minute. If you need to, underline the dependent clauses twice and the independent clauses once and see if you can figure out. You can pause it and we'll talk about that. Okay, let's talk about that. If it is time for lunch, we already said was a dependent clause. We sit down and eat is an independent clause. It could be a sentence by itself. Then we head to the swimming hole as an independent clause. Could be a sentence by itself. So we have we have a dependent and 2 independent. So that's a compound complex sentence, just so you know. All right, so let's see if we found 5 errors. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we just forgot to number this one. And number 4, comma needed before coordinating conjunction that joins 2 independent clauses. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We found all of our errors. So we're finished with the editing exercise example. So keep this example with you when you do your homework, and you're going to do it exactly the same way. It's an editing exercise. It's like this, and there are 10 mistakes in it. So you will put the number above each mistake, and then you will correct it. And remember, for sentence fragments and run-ons, there may be several different ways to correct it. And that is it for the video this week. Thank you.